Today I'm going to be redoing my Why I Hate One Piece video with some new effects, and hopefully I'll be able to cover everything I did before more effectively and with less rage/anger at the top issues I have with the series. Alright, just like I stated before, I managed to get into One Piece after going through several other shows and then decided I needed something new. So I looked up some clips of some new showing to watch, and One Piece was one of the very first things that showed up. And I saw things like Zoro versus Kuma and Sengoku and various things at Marineford that looked very interesting to me. But what really hooked me there would be the Luffy versus Lucci fight, which I thought was spectacular, extraordinary. But that has so many flaws that I'll get into later that it destroys every bit of immersion I can even have into this series. When I first watched it, I thought the entire series would be some sort of epic masterpiece, but I was very gravely and sorely mistaken about that. Contrary to what someone like Gilga said before about how One Piece only gets good after the first 50 episodes, I believe that the first 50 episodes were the best time of One Piece because it was there we got the introduction to all the crew members and their backstories, which are very detailed except for Zoro, because that one was just sorely lacking and disappointing to this day, because I don't even know why he bothered even having a backstory if it was that light. But that's an entirely different video for another time. So I also believe that Alabasta was where the series really started to go back. That was the beginning of the end, because it introduced so many new concepts and so many new story elements that it just couldn't handle it. Now, at this point in the story, Logos are pretty much invincible. It doesn't matter if you shoot them, you stab them, you slice them up with a sword. They just kept on coming back, and and most of them were so powerful they could take out any normal fighter in one attack. They were pretty much unstoppable until Haki was introduced very recently in the series at around the Sabo Deep Archipelago arc. Now, as for the Poneglyphs, that introduced a whole nother supernatural to the series that just was not needed. We were here to find the One Piece treasure, not to figure out what happened in this dumb void century or what happened 800 years ago. It does nothing. This plot element just was not needed at all in the series. Now, speaking for the show, the animation is subpar at best most of the times, with very few exceptions, like the Luffy versus the Three Admirals. It's very clear that they put very little effort into the series, or at least the show itself, and only want to keep selling it and advertising as much as they can. Now, speaking for the manga, I don't really like the artwork itself because it feels too light for the series and all that it tries to cover, and the art and the artwork itself is very jumbled together. Like, sometimes it's very hard to tell what I'm actually reading, so it doesn't fare much better than the anime. Now, if I had to state what the worst part of the series and the show overall is, I'd say the comedy. I hate the comedy in One Piece. If you took out all of the comedic elements, or at least most of them, like this one right here, then the show would instantly be 10 times better. As it is right now, I prefer pretty much any other shonen over One Piece. I prefer something like Kenichi. And I'm not saying that Kenichi is a bad series by any means, but I prefer fucking Kenichi over One Piece, because I've really got into that series. Now that I've finished on most or all of the story-based elements, I'll start getting into the characters, starting with the main character, Monkey D. Luffy. Out of all the crew members, I probably hate him the most, because when you make a stupid character, they have to be an adventurous or goal-driven person, but at the same time being able to respond properly to the situations around them, and as not to seem to be completely heartless or just ignorant of what's going on. Now, in East Blue, like I mentioned before, is the best art. He did this properly, like when Nami was suffering, or when they were in Chopper's homeland, the way he had to climb the mountain. I love those scenes, and they're probably the best parts of Luffy whenever he gets serious. But as of late, probably since like Sabaody, he's gone completely over the edge of everything he does. It's like for example, when Jinbei was explaining the history of the Fishman, which was vital, which was it was him pouring his entire like his history into Luffy, and he just like seeps through all of it, not getting all the details about Fisher Tiger and Koala and the new and the Fishman pirates, how they're revolting against the celestial dragons and everything. That just makes him a terrible person to watch, and overall a terrible human being. Now for Zoro, I hate him because of how damn arrogant he's gotten ever since the time start, just because he's gotten a little bit stronger. And his comedic gags are terrible, just like Luffy. Like Luffy, whenever he meets a species of or new person, new kind of creature, he always asks them, can they poop or whatever. And Zoro, his gag is that his sense of direction sucks, and that leads to them having to do so much extra stuff during arcs, like calling him just being lost all the time. And then he's also kind of misogynistic towards Tashigi because he won't ever take her seriously as a fighter. I don't even want to hear anyone say it's because she reminds him of his childhood friend. Because if he really did think of her like a childhood friend, he would do everything he could to try and beat her, because that was always his goal, to one day beat her, and Tashigi would be the perfect person to try that with. Now for Sanji, he tries to act all cool and everything, but we already know that he's really just a womanizer. And I really don't think that Oda has any respect for women in the way that he portrays like 99% of all of them. The only ones who I actually agree with that I like are like Kami from Fishman Island or Conus from Skypiea. This brings up what I believe to be the three biggest problems of One Piece. The first one being the women, and of course the fan service that are put onto the women. The women themselves are almost all completely useless. For example, like Shirahoshi, Nami, Boa Hancock most of the time. The only exception I can think of to this would be Vivi and Kami and Conus again, respectively both from Fishman Island and Skypiea. Now our problem here is that even with these two guys I explained, they hardly did anything, even in the arcs where they're most prominent. But you compare them to the ones who I said were useless, like Shirahoshi and the rest, and they have much bigger impacts on the arcs that they've been involved in. Like again, Shirahoshi, she's the princess of the Fishman Island, so she became a major focal point for the entire arc. And Boa Hancock, she was the one who got into impelled down, and she was their Marineford. But the problem is that her actions just weren't they weren't properly guided. Her only real motivation for doing that was because of her love, quote unquote, for Luffy, which is there's no way to believe that at all. The fan service in this series spares no one, because every single woman in One Piece probably is in some way sexualized. The only thing that developed for Nami and Robin over the time skip must have been their breasts, because I swear they haven't done anything else besides that. Now I'm not saying that in order to be strong you can't be sexy. I'm just saying that in order to be strong you have to be able to actually, pull your own weight and do as much as everyone else around you. That's it. Look at a character like Ursa Scarlet from Fairy Tail. And most of the time she's actually the leader among all of them, and she does more than Natsu and Gray combined sometimes. I won't go into depth about the rest of the crew because I feel I already explained about them enough, but I will say this about Brook and Robin. Robin, I do like her as a character until New World happened. Then she got like a skin change, like she got some surgery, and I don't know what's happened to her since. But on top of that, she hardly has any fights at all. The last time I remember her fighting, like a real hardcore one-on-one, was like that one guy at Skype. I think his name was Yajima or something. And as for Brook, he's probably the only one of the crew I actually do like, because he is a pure gag character. I don't really care if he ever gets a serious fight or not, but he as a character can also be serious, because he has something like Laboon, which was an excellent done story element from Oda, coming all the way back from the end of the East Blue arc into the what's it called, the whatever Crocodile's organization was called. I can't remember their name right now. Oh yeah, Baroque Works. Right. Going arc by arc, I will explain what made Alabasta such a bad arc for One Piece. Now, as for Skypiea, I felt bored throughout the entire thing up until NL showed up, and that was the only time it really got interesting and piqued me. Her Davy backfight, I would explain what that was bad. It was filler within the main story. although Afro Luffy was pretty cool. As for Water 7 and his lobby, I felt at Water 7, I felt just extremely bored. Oda does not do good when he comes to like building up silent drama in present day. But in flashback, he does good with that. But in present day, it's just dull and it feels almost uninspired with what happened in Water 7. The only exceptions being things like when Luffy fought against Usopp, I guess. But beyond that, Water 7 was completely underwhelming, as well as his lobby. There was one word I could use to describe and lobby. It was underwhelming. The best parts of it was Luffy versus Lucci, and like Sanji versus Giabora, and Zoro versus Kaku, which are all good fights, man. But then you have to wonder how did they manage to pull off these victories? Because Luffy, he out of nowhere, he learned the gear second get there. Zoro learned the Asura, and then Sanji, he learned how to use the Diable Jambage. But it's like, where and when did they have the time to train for this? If you think about this, from the time that they were defeated Water 7, all they did was go down to the train and then take it all the way to Enna's lobby overnight. So by the next morning, they were actually there in front of Enna's lobby. So think about how the hell did Luffy and the rest of them learn these techniques. And on top of that, when he fought Lucci back at Water 7 and he transformed, he put a big hole through his stomach. So where did that injury go? Because when you see him throughout the entire arc of Enna's lobby, he has no injuries on him. My first time watching this, I thought it was really cool, but then thinking back on it, I'm like, where the fuck did all this come from? As for Thriller Bark, I hated that arc. Nah, damn it, Rhymes. I hated it. I couldn't stand to watch the first 3 and the last 6 episodes of it. The reason I stopped was because at the very beginning, that one scene with Nami and Usopp and shit, I could not stand it anymore. I could not do 30 more episodes of this. And even at the end, Kuma could just barely save this arc by himself. It wasn't enough. Then there's also at the end the fight between the crew and Moria and Oz. King of Lightning was talking before about how the fight between Jorah and Jalal in Fairy Tail was just gags. Now this fight was just a bunch of bullshit gags. There was nothing redeemable about it. It's like the Hakurima fight from Fairy Tail. But at least I know that guy, he wasn't hyped up so heavy, and I wasn't expecting that much from him. And he did turn out to be actually a decent fighter himself. Yeah. Even Gecko Moria went harder than Oz when he was fighting by himself, and the Kuma fight was good as well. And that's the only good fight in the series. That and when Luffy versus Lucci. Because I find most of the fights in One Piece, they're just kind of boring. For all the unique abilities they pull out, it just doesn't feel like they're used very effectively, and the fights are kind of monotonous. Mostly because I know that no one's going to die or anything like that. But that goes into the second problem, which I'll be starting soon. Sabaody, I believe, was one of the stupidest arcs of the series because they were repeatedly warned not to mess with the Celestial Dragons, and yet, in the end, that's all that they managed to do and accomplish on Sabaody Archipelago. And on top of that, they didn't even kill the guy. If you're going to fight against an admiral and have the entire Marines come down on you, you might as well have at least killed the guy because of what he's done to you, right? But he didn't even do that. So what was the point in even attacking the Celestial Dragon? All he did at best was knock him out, because we know no one's died. Not even Kuma again could save this arc when he came in there, because even though it was very cool of what he did, we all know that he didn't kill any of those members. We can assume that he just like warped them somewhere, or that they just went to a different dimension at the very least. For my thoughts on Amazon Lily and Impel Down, just refer back to my previous video, or just back to my thoughts on Thriller Bark. They're pretty much the same, whereas it was a waste of an arc in my opinion. It was just boring and monotonous, and everything that was just drab. Alright. So for the big one, Marineford, this was no war at all. It was just a bunch of small skirmishes between all these fighters, and nothing really got accomplished, because out of all the battles that actually happened, I don't even think, like, maybe 5 of them got resolved at most. Like when Mihawk fought Jinbei, he beat Jinbei. Kuma and all the Shichibukai managed to beat Orange Jr. But besides that, very few battles had actual like resolution to them. It's either skipped away to something else like Doflamingo and Crocodile several times over, or it was just cut out completely. We never got to see how it happened. Now, the final problem of this series, One Piece, there is no sense of danger because no character has died in the series yet, with very few exceptions outside of flashbacks and Marineford itself. Like Zoro, he should have died when he fought Kuma. Constance's father, he should have died when he took the God Cannon from Enel. Pell, he took a nuke to the face and he still survived it. How can you take a series seriously where they're put into such deadly circumstances where it's almost sure death, like 99.99% death, and they managed to hit that 0.001% out? What would have been very cool in that situation is if Oda actually decided to make Pell like like a mystical zone Phoenix type. So it would make sense that if he dies, he could rebirth himself and actually survive taking nuclear blasts to the face. Then I would not judge at all. I think that is extremely cool. Now let me say this especially, I do not care for Ace. I don't really like him as a character, and when he died I was glad because it was the very first death in the series, and I was hoping that there'd be even more afterwards, but I was kind of disappointed they spent so much time on just that one death alone. It's like there are more pressing things going on in the war than just Ace. I know that he was the point of it to rescue him, but there are times we have to just move on. And it's like Luffy didn't learn his lesson from that anyways, because he entered this new world and he still, him and his entire crew are still so arrogant, so cocky, challenging Yonko so casually. And it's like, I wish Akainu would be like the Goro from Yu Yu Hakusho and says, should I kill another one? Just so that Luffy could finally learn his lesson and his place in this series. This is a fault of Eiichiro Oda as a writer himself, and that's it. My last thoughts is that maybe the reason I hate the series so much is the fandom itself, because this series, if it's truly we compare Dragon Ball Z, if you would do that, then you should not come up with so many complex theories and speculations of what's going to happen in the future. Because back in the day when Dragon Ball Z came out, no one even thought of so many crazy things like how Zoro might have Mihawk's eye or things like that, or Kobe, what he's going to do in the future, because it was just a series to be enjoyed as it came to you. It's not meant to be so hyped up and then overall just ruined for anyone who's trying to get into this series because they set their expectations too high like I did. Overall though, who knows, maybe it was just the fact that I watched the anime and the manga is just that much better, and I should have stuck with that instead. I could have gotten past the filler and maybe some of the jokes would have been reduced and maybe the women would have been represented better and the actions they did. Who knows, but as of right now, this is what I think of One Piece, and I will probably in the future go back into the manga and read it all over again just to see if I'm right or wrong. But I highly doubt that. And I really do believe that these problems stand no matter what form you try and watch One Piece in.